Thus has it been told since the oldest memory. The first king prepared a great feast to celebrate his son's wedding. It was to be the most joyous of occasions. He sent out his servants to beckon the lords of the realm. A few of these guests abided the summons and came immediately, as they were the most fair of heart. Others did not come, for they were absorbed in their pursuits and their fancies. And there were other lords still who said, "What a disgrace this is, that the king sends mere servants to call us." And they preyed upon the servants and killed them. The king then sent out his singers to deliver a second summons. A few more of the guests came, those who were made hungry by the songs that told of the richly feast. Others ignored the singers, for they had already given their hearts over to fixations. And others still were the cruel lords who had slain the servants. They said, "The king gives us further insult of such lowly messengers. Only this time they are decorated with perfume and melody." And once more they preyed upon those whom the king had sent and killed them. The king grew enraged. He sent out his mightiest soldiers, who seized upon the defiant lords and brought them before his throne. They pleaded their cases, which by all accounts of justice were insufficient. But the king decided to show them mercy, for it was the occasion of his son's wedding. The ceremony commenced. It was done with such glory that the prior turmoil was put altogether out of mind. The guests gathered amongst the colonnades, where garlands hung in splendor, and fragrant smokes drifted over all. Trumpeters stood in rank, their brazen horns glinting, and singers lifted their voices. The bride was veiled in cloth of gold, and the prince girded in a fine mantle. Soldiers lined the path, bearing olive branches instead of spears. Harpers and lyrists made melody beside the altar. In the courtyards, servants hastened to prepare the feast. They were troubled in their labor, for their numbers lacked due to the loss of those whom the cruel lords had slain. The proudest of the cruel lords, he who was called the Brilliant One, observed the servants in their distress. He went to them, saying, "I shall aid you in these tasks, and thus the preparations will be readied without delay." The servants graciously refused. "Your generosity is immense, but the High Lord, our King, has set these duties in our charge alone, and we are not to permit anyone until all is made ready and his word is spoken." With low cunning, the proud lord said, "The king has placed his trust in me. I speak on his authority. Surely he will look upon you with much favor for having the wise sense to make use of my aid. Let us proceed without delay." He kissed them upon their foreheads, and they were much awed at this and took him at his word. The servants showed him to the inward chambers of the palace, where they were preparing the most magnificent food and drink. As well, they were bringing forth the many gilded boxes that contained the wedding gifts given by the king, and arranging them in a splendid array within the courtyards. The cunning lord moved with speed and commanded the servants as the king would. The preparations quickened considerably. In the midst of this commotion, the servants did not notice the deceptive motives of that sly lord. He stole for himself one of the gifts. When he pried open the box, its contents astounded him. Never before had he beheld such a treasure. His desire for more overcame him, and he devised a strategy. In the ceremony hall, the prince and his bride spoke their vows and sealed their bond with a kiss. The sanctuary resounded in elation, and the wedding party and all the guests made their way to the courtyards. They were well pleased to find the feast ready in its entirety, and the servants waiting to attend them. During the feasting, the proud and cunning lord joined with the others of his ilk. The wedding gifts arranged here are treasures beyond your apprehension. We could all draw from this abundance, and still the amount here would be so vast that none would notice the small portion that we claimed. Using the cover of his mantle, he revealed to the others the precious fruit of the coffer he had stolen. They lusted after such wonders, but saw no way to steal them. How could we draw away these treasures for ourselves? Surely we would be seen. I have already drawn many gift boxes away. During the preparations, I hid them in various rooms. As I cannot carry them all myself, you will go, one by one, to the chambers that I tell you. Once we have all departed from the feast, we will gather in the hall of my house and divide the spoils amongst us. The cruel lords all consented to this design, as they were so possessed by their desire for the wondrous treasures and the powers contained therein, which seemed like the powers of the king. One at a time, they went to the chambers where the cunning one had hidden the boxes he absconded from the inner trove. They stole the gifts and clung to them, hidden under their lavish garments. And the lords not involved in this scheme said nothing, despite their sense that something wrong was concealed just out of sight. They kept to their merrymaking. The cruel lords bid their time through the evening and the night, and when the feast had grown late, they spoke their peace and left the palace. Though they had agreed to convene at the house of the one who had orchestrated the theft, the lords aggressed one another before they had even reached the garden gate. They had each glimpsed the contents of the boxes, and they knew the majesty within was too great for them to share. Any who could amass but a few of the treasures could be a king in his own realm and command miracles beyond all former possibilities. They fought to prove who amongst them was the greatest and most deserving of the mighty gifts. Blinded by their own minds, the cruel lords did not see the king approach. He suffered not this trespass and shouted in a voice of thunder, "Cease this fighting!" And all became still. "You have offended me since the moment I bid you attend this wedding. What evil storm have you insisted upon brewing? You sow hatred where there should be joy, and discord where there should be unity." The guests were all made to gather about the offenders. Even as the wrongdoers clutched to the goods they had stolen, they insisted upon their stance. Why should the prince and the bride receive such an excess of wedding gifts? There are more than plenty for us as well. "Have I not given you generosity?" said the king. "And have I not shown you mercy beyond mercy? And yet you want more. Your hearts are sick with an evil hunger. It is better that you should eat dust than to feed such wickedness." The defiant ones would not accept these words. "Your generosity has turned to injustice in our eyes, now that we have beheld these greater treasures. We shall keep this portion, and even so, your son will still have an unwieldy surplus. My son would share with you portions of these gifts beyond all glory, and all in the appointed time. But you wound this good order. You speak falsehoods and shatter peace. You claw to become the king that you are not, and in doing so, you have made hatred out of this day of joy. With terrible fury, the king reclaimed the stolen gifts and expelled the guests from the feast. He sent them to the wide desolation that lay far beyond his domain. His soldiers dragged the worst of them to the grimmest reaches and cast them into that outer darkness. They shrieked in anguish, for they claimed the king's good justice as bad, and their own sin as righteous. Other lords went begrudgingly, though without defiance, and the fairest of them took to discerning what might be in this unknown expanse. You consider yourselves great, but who is it that gave you your lordship? Who was there at your start to set you at your tasks? The king pointed to the desolation of myriad horizons. If you would know who amongst you is greatest, carry out your trials here. These formless realms are yours to fight over as you see fit. You are not worthy to reside in my kingdom. But we cannot live only by our fighting, said the wisest of the lords. With what shall we build? By what means might we amend our trespasses? Draw from the border wilds, replied the king. They teem with stones and molten furnaces, with storms and seas. Create as you choose, but woe be unto he who forgets this day and betrays my word. Will we ever see your glorious domain again? My spirit was with you when I made you lords. Now my spirit has saddened. The clouds overhead grew heavy and shaded. The very air of the expanse took on that heaviness, and a terrible wind blasted. In their many hues of grief, the lords were scattered, though the fairest of them did not lose sight of a ray of light that beamed from beyond all clouds. These masters and their companies were thereby fated to carve out their own realms, they who were driven far and wide after despoiling the wedding feast. They would forge and build, war and scheme, and by many turns and by many ways, they would become rulers in their own rights. So began the sculpting of the world, and following the lords before them, so would the many descended kings and queens vie to exert their influence upon the unfolding story of all.